Okay, so I have 9:33. We're gonna get started. I'm sure more folks will join, but also obviously a big part of this webinar is for folks who couldn't be here and might be engaging with the survey later on. Just want to welcome everyone. I'm Adam Pearl. I'm President and CEO of Art Pride New Jersey, one of the numerous organizations that are helping lead the ArtsPay NJ effort. I want to start with a little housekeeping to mention that closed captions are available using the Zoom feature, typically at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to utilize that feature, please go ahead. I did want to mention right off the bat that we are recording this webinar and we'll be posting it both on individual YouTube, the ArtPrize YouTube page, but more importantly on the ArtsPay website. So if you missed something or you want to share what you hear today, that'll definitely be an opportunity for you to do so. And because we're doing this via webinar, we encourage you to use the questions and answers feature. A question you might ask is probably something that someone else who couldn't be here live might have, and so we really encourage you to use that feature. Post some questions and answers. We'll take those over the course of the webinar, so you don't need to wait to the end. And then also always just sort of keep an eye on that chat feature in case we need to drop anything, links or such, in the chat. And that is the end of my housekeeping. I want to say that with me, excuse me, with me today is John McEwen, Executive Director of the New Jersey Theater Alliance, and Erica Nagel, Deputy Director of the New Jersey Theater Alliance, who are helping to lead this ArtsPay effort. And we are also very lucky to have with us David Reese, the Chief Strategy Officer for Baker Richards, which is the research firm that led both the first ArtsPay and now Phase 2. And David has been sort of the lead architect of this survey, so we really appreciate his time this morning. That's it for me. We're going to keep it moving quick so we can get you as much information as possible. And I will pass it over to my friend and colleague, John McEwen.
Thank you so much, Adam. Good morning, everybody. So wonderful to be with you all this morning, and we're very excited to launch ArtsPay NJ 2025. For some of you, you were hopefully, and thank you if you completed ArtsPay 2023. We thank you so much for that. As many of you know, we hope to offer this ArtsPay NJ study survey every other year. So very surprising how quickly 2025 has rolled around. I believe we have another slide to share. And for those of you that aren't familiar with this project, just want a refresher and some information for those of you that might be new to ArtsPay. We several years ago, in conversation with our colleagues, we realized that there wasn't really a study for New Jersey's cultural community, arts community, on pay equity. We were all participating in a large number of surveys around the country and regionally, where New Jersey was just a slice of that data. We felt it was important to have a study for ourselves. And we wanted to also be able to have some data that would assist our field in building pay equity. This would also provide information and empower arts workers and arts employers as they looked at the data and analyzed it, that they could actually start to utilize this compensation data to actually make change within organizational pay policies, but also empower arts workers when they actually advocate for themselves in terms of their compensation. The 2023 surveys set a baseline for us, and we're actually going to be, through our 2025 survey, we're going to start to see what trends are occurring at different levels and what change is occurring. So that's what's going to be really helpful in this time around. This is all coordinated and supported by the Arts Service Organizations of New Jersey, and of course, the support and encouragement of our New Jersey State Council on the Arts. And it's managed by, as Adam mentioned, Baker Richards, which is a UK-based research firm who started working with us on the 2023 survey, and delighted to have them back. So it is my pleasure to turn this over to David Reese from Baker Richards. Good morning, David.
Good morning, John. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I join you from sunny Cambridge over in the UK. So I say morning, but it's afternoon for me. So just very quickly, who is Baker Richards? We've been around now for over 20 years. We're a kind of international provider of consulting, research, and software for the cultural sector. We've worked with more than 800 organizations worldwide now, focused primarily on kind of organizational strategy, which is driven by a really deep understanding of of audiences and organizations. And as part of our work, we also carry out sector-wide research, including ArtsPay, which has been running in the UK since 2014. We actually just closed the 2025 version of the UK study as well, which it's as the study in the New Jersey is kind of it gives us an understanding of what's been happening over a much longer period of time, focusing kind of not purely on the pay, but also about the conditions that arts workers are in. So things like access and precarity, equity and resourcing, compassion and culture, and trying to kind of create a real deep understanding of what the sector looks like and what the experience is to work in the sector. So on the next slide, we've got the kind of a few findings, headline findings from the kind of ArtsPay NJ 2023 study, which some of you may have been involved with. So just to kind of not go through these in lots of detail, but just as a kind of a very quick summary, and I apologize, it does sound like it's a rather bleak picture that's being painted, but it is a reflection of what we found through the research. And so I guess that representation of reality is really important, upon which you can then start to advocate for change. So a few of the kind of the headlines that came through, I guess one of the fundamental questions that we're always kind of asking with this is, why does anyone actually work in the arts? When you look at the kind of the stats that we were kind of putting out here. So I would guess, headline findings, pay is definitely behind the state average in the arts, and against the kind of wider sport and entertainment industry. It's 9% behind for the arts versus that kind of wider sport and entertainment. It's not kept pace with inflation. So 2023 saw a 2.4% increase versus inflation at 3.7%. Definitely people were working multiple jobs and dependent on income from others. People were working more hours than they were getting paid for. Unpaid internships were common, so 42% took part in an unpaid internship at some point. And most people, unsurprisingly, given the stats that we've just heard, were being paid less than they would expect. So that's kind of a baseline, and I guess 2025 is an understanding to try and see what has happened since then. And just as a kind of way of showing you the kind of baseline annual salary on the next slide, you can kind of see this is our kind of average, actually it's a median of the kind of annual salary that we found in 23, at $64,000, which was an increase of, I think, that 2% from the previous year at 62. So we'll be able to see what does it look like now. And because we're asking in the survey, we're also asking what it was 12 months ago, we'll actually be able to get a 4-year kind of trend. So we'll be able to see what it was in 22, 23, 24, and 25, and then start to split it down in various ways so that we can see where some of those pay gaps kind of exist. So last time we found a $3,000 pay gap, grand pay gap between men and women. So again, seeing, have any of these gaps closed? Have they got wider? Has it kept pace with inflation? So there's lots and lots of things that we can kind of use that baseline to then kind of see what has changed, hopefully in some cases for the better. I think I'm heading back over to you, John.
Thanks, David. So, excuse me. So just to reiterate why this project is so important, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many surveys out there that I'm sure we've all completed, but a lot of them are around organization, not so much individual workers in the arts, and also many of them are regional and national, where New Jersey is just a very small slice of the pie. So really hard to really capture the issues in those particular surveys. We also want to build awareness and transparency so that individuals and organizations can actually start to make change and advocate for change. And the first step for that is actually collecting data and being transparent with that data. We know that low compensation contributes to people leaving the arts and also a less diverse workforce. So we want to ensure that people in the arts are staying in the arts, that are staying in New Jersey. And this data, hopefully, again, will build awareness and begin to make change to ensure that we keep our workforce here in New Jersey. So the New Jersey specific data, as I mentioned earlier, is really going to help us as we talk to our philanthropic partners about the importance of general operating support. So in order to make change, it does require, if we want to make sure that we're keeping in step, at least with inflation, we want to make sure that we're building and sharing this data and building awareness with our philanthropic partners to make a case for the importance of general operating support. And we know that systemic oppression creates wage gaps, and we want to make sure that we all see those gaps. Again, transparency, and by seeing and sharing where those gaps are, we can begin to make some change. So we have two surveys, as many of you know, and I'm so delighted that my colleague, Erica, is going to walk you through the two surveys that are part of ArtsPay 2025. Hello, Erica.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Really thrilled to be here. My role in this webinar is to kind of take you through some of the nuts and bolts and sort of narrow the funnel. And so what does it actually mean to take the survey and be part of this study? So as John mentioned, there are two surveys that run in parallel for ArtsPay New Jersey. The first one is the organizational survey. So that's not the one that we're focusing on today, but just so that you know it's happening. That is a survey. It's filled out by one person on behalf of an arts organization. So somebody will be designated a finance director, an HR manager, an executive director, and they fill out information about all of the positions within that company, including the terms of compensation, the salary levels, things like that. And the hope is that all nonprofit organizations in New Jersey for which the arts are the primary focus of their mission will fill that out. We do have another webinar about that specific survey on Thursday. So if you think you might be the designated individual for your arts organization, we would really encourage you to come back for that webinar or watch the recording afterwards, because there will be some people who fill out the organizational survey for their organization and the individual survey on behalf of themselves. But today, our main focus is the individual survey. So that's filled out by all individuals who identify as an arts worker in New Jersey. And it's going to ask you about your own experiences, your own compensation levels, your demographics, and your perceptions. And so that's the real key difference between these two surveys. The individual survey is where we can identify those gaps because we can't really ask the organizations, or the organizations can't really report on demographics, but individuals can, and that helps us see where those gaps created by systemic oppression and other factors occur. It also is really important that we get to hear from sort of open-ended questions about people's perceptions and reflections around compensation, why they personally stay in the arts, why they might be looking to leave the arts, their experiences and perceptions about working culture, things like that. So that's a really important piece of the data that we're collecting. We want to hear from arts administrators and artists. Also new this year, all participants can enter to win $250, which hopefully is a nice incentive for folks. At the end of the survey, you'll get bounced to a third-party website where you can fill that out so that your information is completely separated from the data that you supplied, because that's all completely anonymous. So that's the one we're going to really focus on today. So as I mentioned, we want to hear from everybody. So arts workers in any artistic discipline, as folks mentioned previously, this is really a collaborative effort between all of the arts service organizations. We want people to be employed by a New Jersey-based nonprofit organization. You might not even live in New Jersey, but if you are employed in New Jersey within the arts, we want to hear from you. This can mean full-time employees, part-time, hourly employees, freelance employees, folks that work on per project contracts, folks that are seasonal, whether you might only be working in the summer, only working outside of the summer, et cetera. Independent artists who are not necessarily affiliated with one organization, but work all over different arts organizations. Artists whose primary employment is not in the arts. So someone who might be, for instance, a teacher in a public school, but they also freelance as a musician. We want to hear from them. We would just want them to focus on the arts specific position when they're replying to the survey. We also want to hear from interns, fellows, student workers, people that are new in the field. New this year, also, we want to hear from volunteers. We really do want to capture this year what kind of volunteer labor is helping keep our sector afloat and moving. University employees also new this year. Thanks to the folks at Baker Richards, they've really adjusted some of the flow of the survey so that we can understand what it is to work within a university in the arts. For instance, if you're at a performing arts center that's under the auspices of a university. Previously, we weren't really able to parse that information, and now the data will be able to reflect that more fully. And we like to say, when in doubt, fill it out. The folks at Baker Richards are really good at weeding out any data that doesn't actually fit. But as you can see, it's a really wide net. We really want to hear from everybody to get a full picture. Adam, I see you coming on screen. Do you have a question from the
Yes,
group?
and I realized I answered it in the Q&A feature, but that's not going to help folks who watch this later on. So I want to make sure we answer it here. And I know that we mentioned this earlier, but it's an important point. The person who asked the question asked if the surveys are completely anonymous, which of course they are, but I don't know if you want to just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. They're completely anonymous. As you're filling it in, you don't put your name, you don't put the name of the organization, you don't put your email address unless you want to be contacted by Baker Richards for potential focus groups or follow-up. But even then, only Baker Richards would ever see that. None of the service organizations that coordinate the project, certainly not the State Council on the Arts, nobody within New Jersey would ever connect your email address to your data. And similarly, when you're saying whether you want to be entered into the drawing for the $250, that's completely separate from the data. Sometimes people have a question about, okay, sure, but like I have a really weird title, and if that's in the data, everybody's going to know I'm the only director of patron experience and strategy and unicorns or whatever. And so that if there's something like that where we only have 1 or 2 data points reflected in the data, the folks at Baker Richards, again, sort of scrub that so that it gets aggregated with other data so that no one will ever be able to kind of trace your data to figure out who you are. They have a lot of experience and background in making sure things are anonymized. And certainly David can speak more about that if there's a better, more technical way to explain that. Okay, so how you would get started, how do you fill it in? So I think the best way, everything exists on this ArtsPayNJ.org website. So that's where you're going to find recordings of this webinar. That's where you're going to be able to take the surveys. You can see the data from last time. There's FAQs, et cetera, et cetera. So go to ArtsPayNJ.org. there will be a button that says take the individual survey, and it's going to pop up the sort of survey platform. You can download the questions as a PDF preview if desired. I will say the individual survey is pretty efficient to take. So that may be a little more useful if you're doing the organizational survey, but you can do it. And you will be able to save and return to the survey. Again, I took it myself. It took me about 15 minutes. So you certainly can save and return, but you can also just sit down and kind of do it in one shot, and it won't take up your day. I believe I'm passing it back to David.
Yes, thank you, Erica. Yes, I think you covered quite a lot of this, but let's just go into the kind of nuts and bolts a little bit in terms of what you're filling in and what it looks like. And I'll share my screen in a minute and show you the actual survey and start taking a few questions so you can kind of get a sense of the flow. So one of the things just to bear in mind is that because if you're working multiple jobs, one of the challenges is we don't want to ask you about every single job. It will take you a long time to fill it in, and it'll make it much harder for us to analyze. So we are asking people when they're filling it in who are working multiple jobs to pick a primary one in order to then share your kind of terms and levels of compensation about that specific job. In terms of the kind of the accuracy of the data that you're providing, obviously, getting it as approximate as you can is ideal. We're not expecting everyone to kind of get their exact to the nearest, cent numbers in there. So round approximate numbers. So if it's like, $64,325.25 for whatever reason, then 64,000 is probably fine. So just, I guess, to use your judgment in filling in those numbers that are asked for. There are lots of open text kind of questions. So when you click through the survey, there's like it's kind of broken out into various sections, and you'll be guided through that when you take it. And most of those sections then have follow-up questions that may not be able to be kind of, there are things that aren't always easy to capture in a kind of fixed list of options. So to allow for that kind of that nuance and the richness of people's responses to really come through, there's plenty of space for people to provide that. And at the end, there's demographic section as well, which is entirely optional, but obviously when we're looking to understand the kind of the pay equity across different kind of demographics, it's always useful to have that information there. So we can see, for example, earlier when we looked at the kind of male female kind of pay gap. So we need that information in order to be able to do that. So we'd encourage you to fill in the demographics if you feel comfortable doing so. There are some expanded sections. So we did kind of taking on board some of the feedback that we had the last time round, and actually there were some sections which just naturally led to kind of further questions, specifically around paid and unpaid internships, specifically around other sources of income, around volunteering, and more detail and kind of freelance kind of sections as well, which came out of conversations that we had prior to kind of putting the survey together with some individuals as part of a focus group to make sure that we're really capturing what it was that it was like to work here, so that that could then be kind of benchmarked as well across the wider sector. So if I share my screen, and hopefully this will allow me to do this seamlessly. Jump in here. I'm going to lose everyone's faces, but I'm going to assume that you can now see my screen. And someone else from the panel can tell me if you can't. So you should be able to see this is the landing page of the individual survey. So there's a little bit of information on here. I won't kind of go through it. It kind of reiterates what Erica has already kind of talked about in terms of like what it involves and how you're kind of fitting it in. If you click next, one of the first questions that you'll see is the question of whether you work in the nonprofit art sector. So if you click anything other than yes, most of those, if you don't work in the sector, if you don't work in a nonprofit, if you don't work in the arts, you'll probably be kind of taken out of the survey. There are a few questions if you say that you don't work in the arts Sorry, if you volunteer in the arts, there are a few additional questions that you were asked as a volunteer, but most of the rest of the survey about pay is not relevant. So when you get through there, there's just a kind of initial introductory question about how would you rate your work-life balance, just to ease you in. And there's a scale there I'm going to put right in the middle at fair. And then as you go through it, you'll see that kind of the way it's structured should be fairly intuitive, so that you're kind of going through and guided through the process. So if you want to say, if you click on certain kind of options at any point, that some of them may trigger additional. Oh, John.
Excuse me, David. Oh, Adam's come back on too. We're having trouble seeing your screen.
Oh, it's not showing my screen.
No, we still see the regular PowerPoint.
All right. Let me try again. Let's try. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. Well, all you missed is a few additional questions that I was skipping through at the start. But
David, let me while we're interrupting, let me jump in because it was actually the question we have is on that screen. It was just on, which was someone was asking if it's possible to get a copy of the primary job, drop down list, so we can assist staff to understand their own category.
Yeah, so at the very start of this survey, on the landing page, if you download the survey, you will get a PDF. It looks really long, and the reason that it's really long is that it covers every single variation that you can kind of possibly come up with to get through the survey, and most of the questions that are on there probably aren't relevant to everybody taking it. So please don't be put off if you download it and go, wow, this is really long. It is, but when you're going through it, it doesn't, I promise you it won't feel that long. So yes, you'll be able to get that. And just to say, when you get to kind of questions like this, they're very flexible in terms of, yes, we've come up with some categories and some lists, as you can see here, performing artists, teaching artists, etc. There's usually always the ability to write something in there as well. So if there's a particular kind of description that you really want to be able to kind of make, you can have that as an additional kind of other category. I'm just going to keep clicking through and let's see. Oh, and yes, if you do click on other, you do have to type in something here. So I'm just going to put in other for now. Then it asks you about, so as I said earlier, once you kind of identified that you kind of work in different roles, it will then ask you to say which is your primary, just as a way of trying to understand, okay, when we're looking and analyzing your results, these are the ones that you're kind of are core to the kind of the compensation questions that you're answering. Again, it will ask you lots of questions about working in single jobs, multiple jobs. So if I say I have multiple jobs, then I get some questions about how many multiple jobs do I have in the arts. I'll also then start to kind of get into the next page is going to then take me to give my specific job title. So again, this isn't a job title that we're trying to force people in. It's whatever your job title is, just enter it as you would. So if I just put a director in there for now, again, we want to try and categorize. So if I'm a kind of administrative director, then I'm having a drop down. This is just so that it makes our analysis comparable, rather than having everybody type in everything kind of freely. Because we're trying to strike that balance between giving you that flexibility, but also making the analysis most meaningful. So I'm just going to click through and I'll stop sharing in a minute and go back to the kind of the slides. But just to give you a sense of, you can see it's very kind of hopefully clear at each screen what it is that you would kind of input into each of those different questions. So if I say I'm full-time, I'm working on a fixed term, it'll then serve me up questions that are relevant to that particular kind of grouping of answers that I've given. So, and as you say, it's as I said, it's kind of, it's tailored. So like it even asks you, now I've typed in director as my title, it kind of remembers that when it asks me questions about what organization I'm primarily involved with. So if I was to say literature, and then what areas my work cover. And some of these, they're quite extensive, which is why if you did want to kind of download it, you could have a quick look beforehand. So I'll stop sharing because rather than me just taking the entire survey in front of you, and let you then kind of go away and take it yourselves. So if I stop sharing, we should end up possibly back at the slides. And then the next slide, I think, just to kind of finish off the section about what happens with the data. We've already mentioned this, and Erica, I don't have anything to add to kind of Erica's description of the fact that the data is anonymous. There are opportunities within the survey if you wanted to take part in follow-up research that you would provide your email for that, but that would only be seen by us at Baker Richards. Adam, you want to jump in because there's a question?
Yes, I had a question about would K through 12 schools be considered as nonprofit, or how else might they be categorized, or are they not captured here in this survey?
That is a good question, and I don't think that it would be, unless Erica and John, you would say otherwise.
Yeah, so they would not be, because they're government employees if it's a public school. If it's a K-12 private school, that would be a nonprofit probably, but it's likely that the arts are not the primary focus of the mission of that independent school. So, you know, if it's a professional ballet training program, K-12 independent school, maybe so. But yeah, the way that salaries get set for educators is sort of outside of the scope, and it could skew the data. Again, if you work at an independent school or a public school and you are a full-time educator, but you also are a muralist, or you dance with a company on the weekends, or you act with professional theater companies, a couple times a year, we would still love to hear about that experience. And there will be places within the survey where you can reflect kind of what percentage of your income comes from that independent artistry versus a full-time job as an educator. That's also true if you're like an accountant or anything outside of the arts.
And in this case, this person, thank you to this person for giving a little follow-up information. The example here was that the person's not an employee of a school, but they're a contracted artist for a residency program at the school.
Ah, wonderful. So great question. So they are contracted directly by the school, not by like young audiences or McCarter Theater to then work at the school. Huh, what a great question. You know, I would say yes, fill it out, and then we will sort of look at things on the back end, because you're still being employed to do an arts program as a teaching artist, and we want to hear about your experience specifically as a teaching artist for sure.
And I have one more question here while we're taking a break, just to jump in here, asking if we can provide some clarification between administrative and education. Example they give is if an individual is a manager or director of education for an organization.
So to me, my people, I also used to be a director of education for an organization. To me, I think if you are on the ground teaching, as well as doing things like managing budgets, hiring other teaching artists, things like that, then I would sort of leave it to you where you sort of want to identify. I think if you are managing a department, if you are an education associate, education coordinator, education director, I would, if it were me filling it out, I would say administrator. If you're sort of split, then I think it's sort of up to you. David, do you have a?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is if you click on that specific question where it says helps you categorize, and one of the options is education and engagement. If you click on that, one of the drop-down options that you get offered then is administrative. So I think that probably covers what you're asking. If you're kind of a primary administrative role is within education, then I think you would still pick education and then have the opportunity to pick administrative below that.
Perfect.
But hopefully, you know, when you can kind of click on the some of those categories, you can then see the follow-up question that kind of immediately appears. And then if you can't find anything that suits, you can just check a different category to see if that's a better fit.
I thought we were done, but someone snuck one in, and I'll do it while we're taking this moment. Our volunteers asked compensation questions, which of course may not apply to a volunteer. So there's some logic to, they're asking about the logic to the survey.
Yeah, so there are probably two sections that if you're a volunteer, exclusively a volunteer, you will only end up doing two sections of the survey. One specifically on your role as a volunteer, and the demographics, because most of the rest of the survey is about pay and compensation. And that's that right at the start of the survey when it asks you if you're working in the non-profit sector, one of the options is no, but I volunteer. And if you only volunteer, you'll only ever see volunteer questions. Everybody else will see all of the compensation questions, plus it'll also ask you later on in the survey if you also volunteer in addition to your paid work. So yeah, we will capture volunteers as well.
And I think, as we mentioned, that's new this year. So if you took the survey last time and you clicked no, but I volunteer, you would have get bounced to a page that was like, thank you so much for your interest, but this is only for compensated employees. This year, even if you had that experience in 2023, this year, go ahead, click no, but I volunteer, and there will be questions for you.
Great. So if I just quickly finish off this slide in terms of the kind of the data and what happens to it. So yes, as we kind of already mentioned, the data is completely anonymous. It's treated confidentially. So even if you were to kind of input your email address as part of being contacted for follow-up work, only us at Baker Richards would be able to see that. We wouldn't kind of release that to anyone else. The specific point that was mentioned earlier by Erica about if you have a very unique job title or you could be easily identified from the data, we'll obviously make sure that that's avoided, so that no one can kind of drill down and see, oh, okay, well, actually that person with that title must be that person. So again, we'll just make adjustments to ensure that we're always showing aggregate data. And if that doesn't allow, then we probably wouldn't show that data in the first place. The other thing to say is the prize drawing, which is available at the end of the survey, is a separate link. So if you wanted to enter that, we wouldn't have that any way of connecting your entry to the prize drawing to your responses. So that's completely separate. And then when we put it together, we'll have kind of various ways of distributing the kind of the findings. So there'll be a written report of key findings. There was a summary version of the individual survey last time, along with a more comprehensive full kind of report. There's an interactive dashboard which brings in the organizational data, which is still available and live from the last time on the ArtsPay NJ website. And of course, all of that information then is free and available to the public. I think I'm now handing back over to Erica.
Great, thank you. So just a few further thoughts about why someone should participate in ArtsPay New Jersey. We do think for individuals, you'll be better equipped to advocate for yourself. You'll have more information about what is sort of market rate, what different organizations have been offering as you build your own career path. It really will help create a more accurate and full picture of the field. I think last year we had about 800 individual responses. It would be amazing to get beyond that this year, because the more people that participate, the better a picture of the field we have, which then helps us build that case, as John was speaking about before, for general operating support. It's all about transparency. We want to inform and empower aspiring artists as well, and arts leaders. Imagine having this kind of information at your fingertips as you're choosing a major or deciding what first job to take out of college. It's important to make sure that the next generations of arts workers and leaders just have more information than some of us might have had. And it will help move our whole sector towards a more equitable and sustainable future. That's sort of the big picture of all of this, is that you are a piece in this puzzle to help us really do this important work. And of course, also nice to have the chance to win $250. And as we mentioned, that's an opt-in at the end of the survey. I'll pass it back to John.
Thanks, Erica. So as we mentioned earlier, this is a partnership and supported by our art service organization colleagues, the Theater Alliance, Art Pride New Jersey, Arts Ed New Jersey, Dance New Jersey, the New Jersey Association of Museums, and the South Jersey Cultural Alliance. We thank all of our colleagues for their time and their guidance and support of this initiative. And we also want to just give a special shout out to our New Jersey State Council on the Arts for their encouragement and commitment and support of this work. We are very, very grateful that the council sees the value of this project as much as all of us do. So on behalf of all of us of the Arts Service Organization community, we thank the Arts Council for their encouragement and support of this project. And well, Erica, I can just keep going. So the surveys, they just opened up on the 24th. If you could please try to complete the survey by the 28th of August. And then we're going to release some data in the fall and winter months where we're going to offer you some webinars to go over the data and discuss the trends and findings. We'll share with everybody how you can actually utilize this and assist all of us as we work together for positive change. So if you're interested in some of the webinars that we've done in the past for the 2023 webinars that were offered to discuss that data and those findings, they are still available on the ArtsPay website. So you can certainly take a look there, and if you wanted some information from what was done last year and what we learned.
Great. And other than taking the survey, which I know all of you are going to do, other ways that you can help is the more that we get organic spread of this information. We certainly, within the arts service organizations, will be reaching out to all of our members. You'll see lots of reminder emails, things like that, but it's really meaningful when it's person to person. When you take the survey, if you're watching this webinar or here live at this webinar, you've got sort of the inside track. And so you hopefully have a deeper understanding of the importance of this project, that it's not just a sort of throwaway survey, but that it is part of a much larger project to change and shift our field. So if you can take that understanding and belief and share with your friends and colleagues, let them know, take it, let them know it only took you 15-20 minutes to complete, and just really share with your network, because that's the way that we'll get the best and most full picture of the situation in our field. And also, you can encourage your employer to complete the organizational survey. We'll be doing a lot of reach out to executive directors and finance managers and things like that. But bring it up in a staff meeting, knock on the door of your executive director. Just let them know that that it's important to you as a staff member to see the organization being part of this project and part of this data as well. And if you need any support from us, you can always reshare things from our social media, et cetera. But really just your personal encouragement to your network really, really means a lot. So I guess we could just all sort of be on camera, and Adam can let us know if there's any other questions that have come up.
I don't see any current questions at the moment. You all did a great job.
Well, don't be shy. We're here for questions.
And I think if you do have any questions, I think our email addresses are on the next slide. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Erica or myself. If for some reason we don't know the answer, we know David is just an email and a pond away. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And just reiterating Erica's earlier comments to please spread the word. Even if you think your employer or another organization that you work with might know about ArtsPay, don't assume, just mention it to them anyway, because we just want to make sure that we're not forgetting anyone. And the more participation we have, the better the data, the better it will be for all of us. So we thank you in advance for helping to spread the word.
We did have one question pop up here, and it's a good segue to the other webinar, which we're going to be hosting later in the week. A question about, for the organizational survey, do we also want university art departments to participate? Which I think is a good question. And like I said, a good note that if you're watching this, there is a second video, second webinar as well.
Yes.
I'm not equipped to answer. Who wants to answer that
Yes.
one?
So if you're a theater, a gallery, and you're under a larger, under a university college setting, this is new this year, we definitely would like you to participate. So there are questions around arts programming under a university setting. And just don't know, Erica, David, any some specifics there that you wanted to share?
And I think too, before you jump in, just to share, because I think this person also was asking about like a department, right? So like the School of Music at Rowan, or or a county school, or anywhere. But I think in that sense, separate and apart from a theater at or a museum at.
Understood. Thank you.
I don't know if you want to confirm or clarify that particular point, John or Erica, but I was also just going to add that, again, when you go through the organization survey, the options that you are presented with will tailor the questions that you are asked, including those that are for affiliated arts organizations with universities.
Yeah, I'll just lift up what Diane put in the chat. I think this is a really clear way to put it: non-curricular arts public programming. So a gallery, a theater, a dance company, but not necessarily like the School of Music or the School of Visual Arts.
Right, right. Yeah. So thank you, Adam, for clarifying. Yep.
And I would just love to give a big thank you and shout out to the folks that helped us in focus groups as we revised the survey for 2025. David already mentioned the teaching artist and freelancers that we met with. They were so helpful and really, really generous with their time and thoughts as we sort of built out that section. And then we also had a really fantastic focus group with folks that work in exactly these non-curricular arts public programming elements of universities, which really helped with what can be a very complicated compensation structure. So a big thank you to all of them.
I think we did it, folks. I'm just gonna say thank you to John and Erica in particular, because for folks that don't know, I mean, we are a consortium of groups, but it's really John and Erica who are leading the charge here. They do so much above and beyond. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you do. I thank you too, David, but your firm's getting paid to do the work. So, no, seriously, thank you all. We appreciate it. This is great work. And as I mentioned, for those that are listening live and want to share, we'll clean up this recording a little bit. We'll get it posted. It takes a day or so. I would imagine probably by the end of the week it'll be up on the ArtsPay website.
Right. Yes, thank you, Adam, and all of our arts service organization partners. Again, the Arts Council, David, your guidance and availability in this work you and your colleagues at Baker Richards is so appreciative. And Erica, thank you for all of the care and leadership you provide this project. And we thank all of you in advance in completing the survey and spreading the word. So thank you again, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. And the organizational survey, just another reminder, the organizational survey webinar is this Thursday at 9:30. So if you haven't registered, please do so, and we hope to see you then.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, y'all.
Have a
Thank
great day.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.